So now might be a decent opportunity to detail who the 12 Olympians were. First, of course, we have Zeus, also known as Jove to the Romans, the preeminent sky god, ruler and father of all of the gods and goddesses. And then we have Zeus's wife, Hera, or Juno, as she was known to the Romans, the goddess of marriage. Poseidon, also known as Neptune in Latin, was the god of the sea and brother of Zeus. After the Olympians were victorious over the Titans, Poseidon and Hades joined Zeus to draw stones, in order to decide which brother would rule over what area of Earth and the underworld. Zeus drew the white stone, making him the sky god, Hades the black stone, making him the god of the underworld, and Poseidon drew the blue stone, making him the god of the seas and taking over from his predecessor, Oceanus. Next, we have Demeter, also known as Ceres to the Romans. She is the goddess of the harvest, and thus where we derive the term cereal from. She was the mother of Persephone, who was lured down into the underworld to become the bride of Hades. And during her stay, she had eaten some of the food from the underworld, a handful of pomegranate seeds, whilst taken captive, which meant that she could never leave, as it was a preordained rule that she had unwittingly broken. Now, consequently, she had fallen in love with her captor Hades, and her initial recalcitrance began to subside as the god of the underworld went to great lengths to seduce her, as it was his earnest wish to marry the young Persephone and make her his bride of the underworld. When her mother Demeter heard of this, however, she was so distraught that she ensured all earthly crops dried up, and thus, with no harvest to reap, all mankind began to starve. Now, after initially expressing indifference towards Demeter's plight, Zeus finally recognized that he had a bit of a problem on his hands. Therefore, to placate Demeter, he decreed that Persephone could return home to be with her mother for 6 months of the year up on the surface of the earth, but after which time she would have to return to be with her husband Hades in Tartarus for the next 6 months. And so this is how we've come to regard the changing of the seasons from this Greek myth. Persephone came to represent spring, which was the personification of vegetation, as she returns back to be reunited with her mother Demeter. That is when we get the blossoming of spring, representing joy, hope, and an abundant harvest. But then the crops wither and die in sadness as she has to return to the underworld, and autumn brings winter. Now we come to Ares, or Mars, as he was known to the Romans, the god of war. Not a very popular figure, but somehow attractive enough to secure the hand of fair Aphrodite. Athena, or Minerva, as she was known to the Latins, is the goddess of wisdom, handicraft, and statecraft and liberty. Apollo, or Phoebus, is the golden-haired god of music, poetry, and literature. He can be found playing his golden lyre, gifted to him by the messenger god, and his younger brother, Hermes, who fashioned the lyre from a tortoise shell. Artemis, or Diana, was the twin sibling of Apollo. She is the goddess of hunting, known for her chastity. She did not live on Mount Olympus, but chose instead to remain in the woodlands and the forests with the ash tree nymphs and the dryads. Then we come to Hephaestus, or Vulcan, as he was known to the Romans, the blacksmith god of fire. He was the child solely born from Hera alone. In a fit of rage and jealousy, Zeus kicked the infant Hephaestus off Mount Olympus, leaving him with a permanent limp. By way of recompense, Hera had him married to the beautiful and much sought after Aphrodite. Now, Aphrodite herself was frequently unfaithful to Hephaestus and had many lovers. In the Odyssey, she is caught in the act of adultery with Ares, the god of war, and they would go on to create Eros, or Cupid, as he was known to the Romans. An incarnate form this time, not the celestial unembodied Eros that we learnt about in the opening creation story. Aphrodite also had a child with the messenger god Hermes. The child takes equal parts of his parents' name to forge his own, Hermaphroditus. And along with Athena and Hera, Aphrodite was one of the three goddesses whose feud resulted in the beginning of the Trojan War. Aphrodite is the goddess of love, born not of Zeus, but from the foam which settled upon the Aegean Sea after the castration of Uranus. She was known as Venus to the Romans and has been featured in Western art as a symbol of female beauty and has appeared in numerous works of Western literature also. The famous painting you can see on your screen is called The Birth of Venus, thought to have been created in around 1480 by Sandro Botticelli. Next, we have Hermes, or Mercury. He is the mischievous messenger god. Hermes is a duplicitous character with winged sandals, a snake-entwined herald's rod, and he was the go-between, the celestial middleman, and the meddler. Hermes was associated with silver, hence his Latin name Mercury, which can also refer to as quicksilver, and is of course a substance one would describe as mercurial, meaning capricious to change. He was also known as the god of trade, of thieves, travelers, sports, athletes, and he was known as a psychopomp. The term psychopomp means a spirit guide. He conducted souls to the underworld, much in the same way as our friend Charon, the grim gondolier, did. He could be considered a psychopomp too. Hermes was also regarded as the god of oratory, literature, and poetry. And we get the term hermeneutics from his name, which means the study or understanding of the principles of interpretation, particularly written texts of the theological variety. Now, lastly, we have Dionysus, or Bacchus, as he's known to the Romans. He was the god of wine, dance, and theatre. He was the product of one of Zeus's many affairs, this time with Semele. When Zeus revealed himself to Semele in his undisguised form, the sight petrified her, and she was eviscerated instantly. Zeus saved the unborn Dionysus and implanted the fetus into his thigh and sewed it up, which is why Dionysus is known as the twice-born. Now, Zeus was plagued by the same concern as his father before him had been, after a prophecy that his first wife, Metis, would give birth to a god greater than he. So he decided to thwart the prophecy by swallowing Metis whole. But she was already pregnant with Athena. Now, one day, Zeus had a relentless headache. The pain throbbed and pounded inside his cranium until he could stand it no longer. Zeus's siblings clustered around him, concerned, but nobody could think of a solution to alleviate the pain. Then in stepped Prometheus, who came up with an idea that he whispered in the ear of the limping blacksmith god, Hephaestus. Soon, Hephaestus returned gleefully, bearing a gigantic, newly made, double-bladed axe. Prometheus now persuaded Zeus that the only way to alleviate his agony was to take his hands away from his temples, kneel down, and have faith. Zeus did as Prometheus advised with some trepidation, and in one fell swoop, Hephaestus brought down the axe in a swift movement directly into the very center of Zeus's skull. Now, to the horror and bewilderment of the crowd, they stood in amazement as they witnessed, rising from the head of Zeus, the tip of a spear. The onlookers gasped as they beheld a female figure in full clad armor rise up majestically. The glorious being stepped out and onto the sand, turning about to face her kneeling father directly. Her eyes were a wonderful gray as she stood there shining resplendently with her shield and plumed helmet. Quite naturally, an owl flew out to rest upon her shoulder. She was the epitome of infinite wisdom. Zeus's wound healed rapidly, leaving no trace, and he stood up feeling more robust than ever. He gazed at the daughter who had caused him so much pain, and he smiled a warm smile. Athena, he said. Father, she said, smiling gently in return. The Greek term parthenogenesis refers to asexual reproduction or conception from a singular entity. The word is sometimes used in theological contexts as another way of referring to the virgin birth. If we were to be really pedantic, however, the story of Zeus giving birth to Athena from his head does not strictly qualify as being parthenogenic due to his intimacy with Metis and her already being with child when he swallowed her. A better example would be Gaia or even Hera giving birth to Hephaestus without the help of Zeus.